A $25,000 car now selling for just $12,000. That is not a promotion. It is a red flag. Nissan, once a titan of the automotive world, is quietly collapsing before our eyes. Walk into a dealership today, and you are not seeing sales. You are seeing survival. Entire rows of unsold vehicles sit with price tags slashed so deep, they read more like clearance stickers than automotive offers. But industry insiders say it is worse than it looks. Inventory has swelled beyond control. Dealers are overwhelmed, and demand has cratered. These discounts are not a marketing tactic. They are a lifeline. And when a company starts selling cars for half of what they are worth, something is terribly wrong. So why are buyers walking away even at record low prices? Why are dealers begging for fewer vehicles? And why could the decisions made in the next few months determine whether Nissan survives at all? Stick with us, because the answers to these questions are more shocking and more personal than you might think. What went wrong? Losing 99% of your income in a single year sounds unthinkable, but that is exactly what happened to Nissan. One of Japan's most storied automakers experienced an almost total collapse in profitability. For a company that once stood as a global powerhouse, this kind of financial decimation does not come without deep structural failure. Within the span of just a few financial quarters, Nissan's earnings dropped by an astonishing 99%. This is not just a dip, it is a cliff dive. Executives went from reporting healthy margins to scrambling to justify operating expenses. According to industry analysts, this kind of drop is not merely alarming, it is historic. It signals a complete breakdown in how a business operates, sells, and sustains itself. How does a company lose nearly all of its profit? The answer is layered. A combination of global sales declines, bloated operating costs, and dwindling consumer interest have formed a perfect storm. Add to that a weakening product lineup, years of underinvestment in research and development, and fierce competition from brands like Toyota, Hyundai, and Tesla, and the pressure becomes overwhelming. The crash in profits is not a singular anomaly, it is a verdict. And it is a verdict being handed down by the market, by consumers, and by former loyalists who are turning their backs on a brand that once symbolized dependability and value. What this number represents is not just a decline in earnings, it represents a collapse of trust, confidence, and relevance. And the erosion of trust did not stop with the boardroom or the spreadsheets. It went straight to the people who once built their lives around Nissan. The collapse of consumer confidence. Customers once trusted Nissan with their families. Now, they are walking away. For decades, Nissan held a firm grip on the hearts of practical, budget-conscious drivers. But that emotional connection has fractured. The decline of consumer confidence has not been sudden, but it has been relentless. A key culprit behind this trust collapse lies in Nissan's continuously variable transmissions, more commonly known as continuously variable transmission systems. Once marketed as an innovation in fuel efficiency and smooth driving, these transmissions have turned into a public relations disaster. Reports of rough shifting, delayed acceleration, and outright failure have dogged Nissan models from the Sentra to the Pathfinder. Owners have taken to forums and social media, venting frustration over transmission replacements costing thousands of dollars just a few years into ownership. The damage has gone beyond angry comments. A recent consumer satisfaction survey revealed that Nissan ranks significantly below its peers in reliability perception. Lawsuits, recalls, and viral videos detailing CVT breakdowns have collectively battered the company's reputation. And once that perception of dependability is gone, it is nearly impossible to reclaim. Loyal customers who once replaced their Nissan with another Nissan are defecting to competitors in droves. Hyundai, Honda, and even Ford are scooping up buyers disillusioned by a brand that no longer feels safe or smart. The result? A shrinking customer base and a bloated inventory of cars no one trusts enough to buy. But customers are not the only ones losing confidence. The places where those cars are supposed to sell, Nissan's own dealerships, are in free fall. Dealerships on life support. Nearly 40% of Nissan dealerships are bleeding cash. Some have already shut down. Across the United States, Nissan's retail network is crumbling under the weight of an unsustainable business model. These are not just outlier franchises in rural towns. This is happening in major metro areas where demand should, by all metrics, be stable. Dealers operate on thin margins even in the best of times. But Nissan's situation has tipped into something far worse. The company's reliance on high-volume, low-margin sales, especially fleet deals, has starved retailers of the kind of profitable foot traffic they need to survive. Many now report having to sell cars at or below cost just to clear space on the lot. That strategy might move metal, but it devastates the dealership's ability to stay solvent. In fact, the average return on sales across Nissan's network has dropped from over 3% to barely 1%. Industry benchmarks suggest anything below 2% is unsustainable. When margins collapse, so too does the ability to provide competitive service, hire staff, and offer incentives. The downward spiral feeds itself. Some dealers have had enough. Reports indicate that at least 8 franchise Nissan stores have closed in the past year alone. Others are actively exploring different franchise partnerships or lobbying Nissan's leadership to shrink the network by as much as 40%. The anger is palpable. Dealers feel abandoned, unsupported, and locked into a system that no longer serves their customers or their bottom lines. And yet, even this is just the surface. Because while discounts, profit collapses, lost trust, and dealership closures scream crisis, they all point toward something deeper, something systemic, something that has been rotting inside Nissan for years. What comes next is not just about business, it is about identity, vision, and whether Nissan can still remember what made it great in the first place. How Nissan became a fleet sales dependent brand. The cars you rent at airports? Those are not just placeholders. They are a symptom of a much deeper problem. And in Nissan's case, they represent a desperate pivot that backfired. Once known for delivering dependable, consumer-focused vehicles, Nissan has drifted far from that legacy. Instead of innovating for the modern buyer, the company has leaned heavily into fleet sales, bulk deals with rental agencies, government contracts, and corporate fleets. On paper, these might appear like easy wins. After all, you sell in volume, lock in predictable revenue, and fill production lines. But the reality is far less rosy. Fleet sales are notorious for offering razor-thin margins. Unlike traditional buyers who select a car based on trust, aspiration, or brand loyalty, fleet buyers are motivated purely by cost. These are transactions stripped of emotional connection. And for Nissan, this approach has slowly but surely hollowed out the brand's soul. When your vehicles are seen more in airport parking lots than family driveways, you risk being remembered only as the car people drive when they have no other option. What makes this worse is that fleet dependency distorts demand. It gives automakers the illusion that sales are steady, when in fact, consumer interest is quietly evaporating. Nissan's retail sales, direct to individual consumers, have steadily declined, while fleet sales made up a growing chunk of its total volume. As a result, Nissan has been flooding the market with vehicles that customers did not actively choose. And this oversaturation feeds into another problem: heavy discounting. With too many cars on the lot and too few buyers, prices are slashed to keep vehicles moving. That further erodes brand value, turning a vicious cycle into a business model. But perhaps the most damaging outcome of this overdependence is how it quietly strangled the company's ability to innovate. Because when you're selling mostly to fleet managers focused on budgets, you stop listening to real consumers, and that isolation from feedback becomes fatal. Innovation paralysis in a fast-moving market. While rivals unveiled hybrids, Nissan stalled in neutral. Innovation, once Nissan's calling card, has become its Achilles heel. In a decade defined by electrification, sustainability, and software-led vehicle experiences, Nissan has failed to deliver. It was not always this way. The launch of the Nissan Leaf in the early 2010s was bold, even visionary. It was among the first mainstream electric vehicles available globally. But over time, the Leaf was neglected. Updates were minimal, range improvements were marginal, and styling remained dated. As the competition sprinted ahead, Nissan barely moved. Toyota seamlessly integrated hybrid options into nearly a third of its fleet. Hyundai and Kia launched all-electric platforms like the Ioniq and EV6. Tesla, of course, continued to dominate headlines and consumer interest. Meanwhile, Nissan offered no hybrid or plug-in hybrid models in key markets. Their most popular models, such as the Rogue and Altima, remained stuck with traditional internal combustion engines. The company even delayed the hybrid version of the Rogue until at least 2027. That is nearly 2 decades after hybrid tech became mainstream. So, what caused this stagnation? It was not just technical hesitation, it was cultural. When a company begins to rely on fleet sales and cost cutting, the incentive to innovate disappears. Bold projects get shelved. Engineers stop pushing the envelope. The company settles into a survival mindset. And soon the world moves on. But innovation is not just about what happens in the laboratory or on the design table. It is also about the people steering the ship. And in Nissan's case, the loss of visionary leadership has left the company drifting. The ghost of Carlos Ghosn, the man who saved Nissan, also might have broken it forever. Carlos Ghosn was once hailed as a genius, the architect behind the historic Renault-Nissan alliance, the man who dragged Nissan out of financial ruin in the early 2000s. He slashed costs, improved efficiency, and brought Nissan back to profitability. But what began as a revival slowly twisted into an empire built on control and secrecy. By the time he was arrested in 2018 on charges of financial misconduct, Carlos Ghosn had become a symbol of unchecked corporate power. His dramatic escape from Japan in a musical equipment case turned him into an international fugitive, and the scandal rocked Nissan to its core. But the real damage went deeper than headlines. Ghosn's departure left a massive leadership vacuum. His successor, Hiroto Saikawa, resigned in disgrace less than a year later. What followed was a revolving door of top executives, each struggling to steady the ship. Corporate governance fractured. Internal power struggles between Nissan and Renault intensified. Decision-making slowed. Bold ideas were shelved. Risk-taking evaporated. And worst of all, no clear vision emerged to guide Nissan through its next chapter. Without a charismatic unifying figure or a coherent strategy, Nissan's leadership simply reacted. They cut costs. They chased volume over value. And they ignored the growing storm clouds of electrification, digitization, and changing consumer expectations. The ghost of Ghosn haunted every boardroom meeting, not because he was missed, but because no one knew how to lead without him. And in that vacuum, Nissan began to forget what it stood for. Brand identity crisis. Is Nissan a tech pioneer, a budget car maker, or just lost in the middle? Ask 5 consumers, and you might get 5 different answers. That is not a brand, that is confusion. Nissan's identity, once built on affordable innovation and sporty flair, has been diluted by years of compromise. Take a walk across a Nissan dealership today, and you will see the signs. Models that look dated, interiors that feel uninspired, tech features that lag behind the competition. Now compare that with the sleek sophistication of a Hyundai Ioniq, the refined dependability of a Toyota Camry, or the digital edge of a Tesla Model 3. Nissan no longer owns a distinctive space in the consumer's mind. This crisis of identity is not just cosmetic. It affects everything from marketing to product development to customer loyalty. A confused brand cannot attract talent, cannot inspire loyalty, and cannot command a premium. And the consequence of that is financial erosion. If consumers do not know what you stand for, they will default to the brands that do. Nissan has attempted to course correct, with aggressive promotions, refreshed models, and talk of a tech-forward future. But without a clearly defined identity, without a compelling reason for buyers to choose Nissan over the alternatives, those efforts feel scattered. Because in a marketplace crowded with compelling choices, only brands with clarity survive. And this confusion made their next move feel even more desperate. RK Plan, Nissan's make-or-break strategy. 7 new models in 3 years. Is this a comeback or a last stand? That is the question looming over Nissan's most ambitious project in recent memory. The Ambition, Renewal and Knowledge Initiative, better known as the ARK Plan. This sweeping program is more than a refresh. It is an aggressive push to rewrite the company's future. The core of ARK involves launching 7 brand new models in North America by the year 2026, while simultaneously refreshing 78% of its existing global lineup in just 3 years. But this is not just about quantity. It is a strategic recalibration meant to reintroduce Nissan to a market that has, quite frankly, moved on. A critical pillar of the ARK plan lies in electrification. Nissan has pledged to release 34 electrified vehicles worldwide by the year 2030, with 19 of those being fully battery-powered electric vehicles. This shift includes renewed investment in solid-state battery technology, an innovation that promises greater range, faster charging times, and lower cost compared to conventional lithium-ion cells. Production trials for solid-state prototypes have already begun, with hopes of market readiness by the year 2028. Nissan also intends to streamline its operations to improve manufacturing efficiency, aiming to cut production costs while maintaining flexibility to adjust to changing consumer demand. But beneath this ambitious rollout is a sense of urgency, a quiet acknowledgement that time is running out. Industry insiders have called ARK a high-stakes gamble, one that requires not only flawless execution, but also something Nissan has struggled to capture in recent years: buyer enthusiasm. You can launch cutting-edge vehicles, refresh tired designs, and pack in next-generation technology. But none of it matters if no one is interested in buying. And right now, Nissan's biggest obstacle is not engineering. It is perception. Because while Nissan plans big, it is still digging itself out of a financial hole, one that has led to an even more precarious strategy that defines what comes next: selling cars at a loss. What happens when you lose money on every car sold? And sell anyway? Welcome to Nissan's current reality. To lure customers back to dealerships, Nissan has rolled out drastic price cuts and aggressive financing offers. We are not just talking about a few $100s here and there. In many cases, discounts exceed 15% off the invoice price. Combine that with 0% financing over 60 months on select models, and you begin to see the scale of the desperation. But there is a hidden cost behind these incentives. According to recent dealership reports, the average net profit for Nissan stores in the United States has plummeted by a staggering 70%. In some cases, dealers are selling vehicles below the price they paid to acquire them, simply to move inventory. This strategy might stimulate short-term sales, but it wreaks havoc on the bottom line. Worse, it sets a dangerous precedent where consumers begin to expect ultra-low pricing, making it nearly impossible to raise prices in the future without backlash. The logic behind selling at a loss is grim but calculated. For Nissan, every car that sits unsold costs more in storage, logistics, and depreciation. By clearing out these models, even at a loss, they can begin shifting attention to new models under the ARK plan. But the financial pain does not stop at Nissan's headquarters. These losses are trickling down into the very heart of Nissan's ecosystem, its dealership network, a fractured dealer network. Even loyal dealers are closing shop and cutting ties. The trust that once bonded Nissan to its dealership partners is showing signs of severe strain. A growing number of franchisees are reporting unsustainable operating conditions, with nearly 38% of dealerships currently operating in the red. Some have already shut their doors. Others are clinging on, but just barely. Much of this frustration stems from a fundamental misalignment between corporate strategy and retail reality. Dealers argue that Nissan continues to flood them with vehicles they cannot sell, while slashing profit margins with mandated discounts. As a result, dealerships are not only losing money on new car sales, they are also seeing reduced revenue from trade-ins, service contracts, and financing packages, all of which rely on high sales volume to sustain profitability. This has led to a growing chorus of calls to shrink the network. Some experts suggest that reducing the number of dealerships in the United States by as much as 40% might be necessary to stabilize those that remain. But cutting dealerships is a double-edged sword. Fewer locations mean fewer opportunities for customers to engage with the brand, especially in rural or suburban markets. Worse, mass closures would mean job losses, political blowback, and a potential exodus of long-standing franchise partners. And yet, Nissan may have no other choice. Maintaining a bloated network built for a 7 to 10% market share is not feasible when that share has collapsed to less than 2%. The old framework cannot support the current reality. But even with fewer dealers and deeper cuts, one critical issue still remains, and it is getting harder to hide: flooding the market with unsold inventory. So many unsold cars, some are being shipped back. Nissan's overproduction problem has reached crisis levels. Showroom lots across the country are overflowing with vehicles, some of which have sat idle for months. In a desperate bid to clear space for newer models, some dealers are even refusing deliveries. Others are sending excess inventory to auctions or back to central distribution hubs. This situation echoes a familiar pain from the pandemic-era miscalculations. Back then, Nissan ramped up production to meet what it expected to be surging demand. Instead, they were left with lots full of unsold vehicles and supply chain chaos. The lesson: building cars no one wants is just as costly as building none at all. Today, the stakes are higher. Nissan cannot afford another misstep. Its warehouses, supply depots, and partner lots are nearing full capacity. Incentives have already been stretched thin, and with the ARK plan hinging on fresh model launches, dealers are running out of space to display them. This gridlock means Nissan risks sabotaging its own recovery by choking new momentum with the weight of old mistakes. And now, as Nissan stares down an overcrowded lot, a crumbling dealer base, and razor-thin margins, it must confront a question it has long avoided. Is this a reset or the beginning of the end? Electric vehicle price wars and the new battlefield. Tesla slashed its prices. BYD doubled its exports. Hyundai offered discounts so aggressive some dealers were caught off guard. Welcome to the battlefield that will define the next decade of automotive survival: the global electric vehicle price war. And Nissan. It is barely visible in the smoke. What used to be a race for range, speed, or style has now become a race to the bottom. The cost of owning an electric vehicle, once considered an elite luxury, is plummeting as manufacturers slash prices to court budget-conscious buyers. But this isn't a marketing stunt. It is a symptom of collapsing margins, overproduction fears, and a desperate push to grab market share before the entire game changes. Brands like Tesla and BYD have the infrastructure and scale to survive this bloodbath. Tesla builds its batteries in-house. BYD controls raw materials. Even Hyundai, once laughed off in the premium space, now competes directly with legacy brands by offering solid performance at a fraction of the cost. But Nissan, once a pioneer with the Nissan Leaf, has stumbled. After early success, the brand fell behind. Slow to electrify, slow to scale, and slow to innovate. It now finds itself trying to play catch-up in a market where every misstep is punished. Margins are collapsing across the board. The profit once made per vehicle is being shaved thinner and thinner. And with solid-state battery production still years away for most brands, including Nissan, the cost of producing electric vehicles remains high. Consumers want more range, faster charging, and better tech, all while paying less. It is a brutal equation, and those without deep pockets or breakthrough technology are being squeezed out. Nissan's dilemma is made worse by its late entry into competitive electric vehicle segments. Its newest offerings are either delayed or limited to markets like Japan and Thailand. Meanwhile, the United States and Europe are being flooded with better-priced, better-equipped alternatives. And Nissan's name, already bruised by years of quality concerns and an aging lineup, simply doesn't carry the same weight it once did. But the real danger isn't just being outperformed. It's being forgotten. Because even if Nissan survives this moment, the battlefield has changed forever, and the rules of survival are no longer the same. What the market thinks Nissan should do next. Wall Street says shrink. Dealers say pivot. And if you ask consumers, many would say Nissan has already disappeared. But under the surface, this crisis is more than just headlines and hot takes. It is a tug of war over the brand's very identity, and every stakeholder is pulling in a different direction. Investors want Nissan to get lean, fast. They are calling for aggressive cost-cutting measures that could reshape the company overnight. Some demand that Nissan reduce its dealership footprint in the United States by as much as 40%, arguing that too many locations are bleeding money in areas with too little demand. Others believe the brand should exit underperforming markets altogether, focusing only on regions where it still holds consumer trust. In this camp, the logic is simple. Fewer factories, fewer models, fewer risks. Tighten the belt. Cut the dead weight. Focus on profitability, not reach. Dealers, however, are pleading for a different solution. Not less Nissan, but better Nissan. They are on the front lines, and they see the damage up close. Cars that do not excite, marketing that does not connect, and headquarters strategies that feel out of touch. Many dealers are losing money not just from low foot traffic, but from forced discounts and unrealistic inventory quotas. Several have closed already. Others are exploring ways to jump ship to more profitable franchises. What they are demanding is clear: newer products, quicker updates, and more say in how they operate. And then there are the consumers, the ones who once trusted Nissan as the sensible choice. That trust has been steadily eroded by years of transmission failures, lackluster tech, and an identity that feels stuck in the past. Today, buyers want electric, efficient, and exciting. And right now, Nissan feels like none of the above. Caught in the middle, the company is trying to please all three sides at once. It has announced 7 new models in North America within the next 3 years. It is investing in solid-state batteries, restructuring its manufacturing footprint, and experimenting with 0% financing. But the reality? These changes take time, and no one is patient anymore. Now the question is, recovery or bankruptcy? One path leads to a bold reinvention, leaner, smarter, and electrified. The other leads to irrelevance, and possibly worse. But what do you think? Let's know in the comments down below.